connect how each of us, the way we live our lives, connects to the larger global picture of warming and its consequences. We should be teaching our kids to follow their thought processes to the logical end, even if it means it's discomforting. Not teaching them to be cowards. Last time I was talking about connecting the dots and how you cannot think of climate change in isolation, and that it's a phenomenon that connects itself to everything that we do and the way we live, and that it will force us to rethink the way we live, the way human beings live, and the way we treat the earth. And there's an interesting study that shows that about 10% of Americans now fall in the category of what's called the creatives. And apparently, so the creatives are people who question the way the world works right now, the whole industrial society that we live in. And this group of Americans, and this actually Europe also has an equivalent number of people, and I believe that a lot of you are in that group. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is that whenever I give talks like this, I'm most of the time talking to the choir, preaching to the choir, okay? Because very seldom do I get to talk to people who have at least not had an inkling that there's something wrong. Okay. So, and it's very unfortunate, but I get to do that in my class a lot. Okay, I'm teaching to students who come from a very, very wide background. They're trapped in my class. They have to take it, and so that's how I sort of get a wider audience. But unfortunately, I tend to speak too many times to preach to the choir. But it's okay, as long as the message goes out. It's all the radiation anyway. Today what I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk about how I connected the dots, how it all became sort of a moment for me when I suddenly realized that the worldview that I had was not fitting the facts, So just as background, when I came to this country, I came to the United States because, to me, the United States is the place to do science. Okay. If there is any country on earth where you can do good science, it is the United States. Even now, despite the budgetary hassles and all of that stuff, there is no place that encourages thinking, free thinking, that supports people like me who are foreigners, on an equal footing with American-born people. There is no place like this at all, okay? Not even close. So that's why I came to the United States. And when I came here, I came very starry-eyed, a lot of the information in the United States I obtained from Hollywood, of course. So I half expected, to be run over by cars speeding on the highway and so on and so forth, or shot by some person, accidentally. But, and those kinds of things. And I didn't know how to use a Coke machine, for instance, and it was, amazing to see Coke come out of the machines. And when I came to this country, I bought everything about this country, hook, line, and sinker. Okay. It was, commercialism was completely acceptable to me. I rejoiced in it. Okay. So this is 25 years ago. And I still remember going to Subway to eat their steak and cheese sandwich, or whatever, sub, okay? I still remember that. Of course, over the years, I began to see more clearly what it means to, when you go to a grocery store and you see the polished apples, I wasn't so impressed with them anymore. And then I'd go back home and I'd eat apples in Europe, which were not so polished, or I'd eat mangoes in India, or fruit elsewhere, and I'd think, these taste so much better than the crap they sell in Hy-Vee, even though they look so good. What is the problem here? The cauliflower in India, if you ever go to India and eat a cauliflower, it's a totally mind-blowing experience. It's nothing like the cauliflower here. The cauliflower here doesn't even smell like cauliflower. It smells like cardboard to me. Okay. And we were in England last year, and we ate these strawberries. My God, they were amazing. You know, and we eat the strawberries here. It's nonsense. Even at the co-op, that's terrible. And so for me, the the shades fell over many, many years. Okay. But I did not have this moment until I went to India. Okay. And I went to a part of India that I'd never been before. So this is completely new. It sort of woke me up, you know. So let me start by looking at this particular figure of India, where I compared the forests pre-industrial. So this is before, I would say before, in 200 years ago, okay, India was 90% forest covered. Today it's 7%, and you can see what, that's where it is. Okay. There are small patches of forests. There are 1,400 tigers left in India. Okay, 1,400. And I suspect that in about 20 years there will be no tigers left in India. Okay. There were 10 lions left in India a decade ago. Okay, 10 lions. Okay. And the Forest Service decided, oh my God, there are only 10 lions, we need to save them. Okay, so they cordoned off that particular area, and now there are 100 lions in India. They're all inbred, they can hardly walk. You don't support ecosystems like that. Ecosystems are very fragile. So now there are 100 lions, but they are good for nothing. They're just like lying around and stuff like that. In the region of India where I work, there used to be tens of thousands of panthers. Now there are 6. There were 7 last year, and when I was coming back last year, going to the airport, there was one that was dead on the road, run over by a truck. So there were 6. Okay, I know because I work with the people who do the surveys of leopards. So that is India, and it's a very, very complicated problem, but this goes to the one single issue that I want to talk about on a personal level, which is, this is the reason why I went vegan. Okay, my experience in India made me just go vegan. And this is the change that I made. So when I work in India, so I go every year, and I'm working actually even right now on research projects on this. There's this area called Rajasthan, which is in the northwest of India. This is Pakistan right here, so it's a border state. It's separated from Pakistan by a desert here. Okay, this is it's called a Thar Desert. There's nothing there but sand and camels, and lots of nomadic tribes and so on. If you have heard of the gypsies in Europe, right, the Romanos and so on and so forth, they originally came from this region. Okay, they went to Romania and so on and so forth, and then into Italy. So those are pretty much people from this region of India. I work in this area here, and this is a hill range. It's called the Aravalis. These are some of the oldest hills on Earth. Okay, so there are gentle hill ranges. On the opposite side, of course, are the Himalayas, right, which are one of the youngest on Earth, and they are very tall and craggy and all that stuff. But on this side, India, of course, was a separate landmass that collided into Asia at some point, correct? And so the Himalayas are a result of that collision. But these are very, very old hill ranges. And so this is a desert. This part is like barren land, okay? And it transitions to this side. So this hill acts as a barrier to the desert, okay? And here there's all the plains, and it's green and so on and so forth. And we operate in this area around a city called Udaipur, which is a beautiful, beautiful city. The forest there where Kipling conceived of Jungle Book as being placed there. Okay, so it's a locale for Jungle Book. Okay, and so we are interested in saving those forests. We are interested in saving those forests because otherwise the hills are going to be denuded, and the desert's going to go over the hills and into the rest of India. So we don't want desertification to happen. Okay, so we want to prevent desertification. So that's that's the overall goal of what's happening. So if you look at the forest cover in that region, this is 1972. So the greener implies dense forest, and this light green implies open forests. And that is the definition of forest in India, by the way. Open forest, that's 10% tree cover. Okay. The dense forest has to have over 40% tree cover. All right. So so if you look at that particular region, 1972 to 2000, you can see how. Let's take this region here. The forest, the dense forest, has been replaced with the gray. The gray is barren land, which implies there is nothing that can grow there anymore. Okay, it's gone. Right? This particular region in India has suffered a 40-year drought at the moment. All right? So there is no water. So this is where we are trying to get this forest to come back. All right? We're trying to get these forests to come back, or at least stay in the state they are in right now. Okay. And this is called Kumar Wildlife Reserve. So when I went there about 3 years ago, because I don't know if anybody knows Raj Gopalan, who is a geography professor here. He wanted me to go there with some students from Iowa, and he said, you should go there. And I said, why? And he said, well, there's a problem with deforestation there. And I said, deforestation? I'm a mechanical engineer. What am I going to do with deforestation? And he said, it'll be a good experience. Why don't you go? And I said, okay, why? Raj is a very persuasive guy. He has very long fingers, and he stuck it in my face and said, you are going. So I said, okay, it might be fun. I like the place. Rajasthan is beautiful. So I took students and went over there, and it changed my life. Okay, yeah, I'll tell you how. So what I saw there was this. So if I look at the Kumbhalgarh Wildlife Reserve, and I stand on a hill and I look at it, this is what you see. So this goes on for a few miles in that direction. There is wildlife there. There are, as I said, about 6 panthers now. There are some bears and other wildlife. But then you look at the other side of this. If you look on the other side, looking one way, you see this. The other side, you see that. There is not a single tree on these hills. These used to be verdant hills, just like the other ones, for as long as the eye could see. Now, for as long as I can see, you see this picture, not the other one, right? It struck me as being completely crazy. And I said, what is going on here? How do we go from that forest to this state here? So we've been going, and this is pictures from last year, taking students from Iowa, engineers and liberal arts majors and everybody. And we go in the winter and we study the problem, and we've been working on a solution that I will talk about later. And so this particular, I'm going to show you a series of pictures here, trying to give you an image of why those forests are disappearing. Okay, and that's us going on a trek. So what we did, we went to the villages in this region, and we said, what we should do? We should follow the villagers through the day and see what's causing this problem. Okay, so we went and we walked with the villagers, and so I call it walking 5 miles in the flip-flops of the women of Courage. Courage is a village, the name of the village. Okay, that's up in the hills. These are tribal people. These are old tribes. If you can think of the tribes, let's say in the Sierra Madres, like the Raramuris. I don't know if you've heard of them. These are if you've read the book Born to Run, or those kind of things. So these are the tribes, the native tribes that live high up in the Sierra Madres, and they are the world's best runners. Okay, if you've seen Last of the Mohicans, they're connected to those people that ran away into the mountains when they were invaded by the Spanish, and they've lived there ever since, and they're incredibly good runners. So in this book, Born to Run, which is very interesting, this guy, a reporter from New York Times, goes out there and he tries to find out the secret behind these guys running. Because it turns out that there is a particular ultra runner, people who run 50 miles, 100 miles, right, at a stretch, set up a competition between these tribes there, the Raramuris, and the best ultra runners of the world, okay? And so he brought them to California and he made them all run a 100-mile race. And so all the best runners, all the Nikes and all that stuff. And so Nike made special shoes for these Raramuris and gave them the shoes and all that stuff. And so everybody starts running. I tell the story because there are parallels to this tribe. I will explain how. And so all of them start running. The best runners in the world, and these guys, and the best runners in the world, the Americans and so on, are just beating these guys like crazy, right? These Native Americans are like not, the people, the Raramuris are not really doing very well. So they're running really slow. And then about the 10th or 11th mile, they all stop. And everybody's wondering what happened. I thought this was a famous tribe that were great runners. They all take off their shoes, the Nikes, and throw them away. And then, and by that time, the American runners are way ahead of these guys. And so at the 26th mile, which is the marathon, the Americans are just beating them like crazy. And everybody's given up on these guys. It's like, these guys are not that impressive. And at the 50th mile, the Raramuris take over. That's when they start running. And by 100 miles, they've beaten these guys by 7 miles. So, so these are tribes that have adapted to living in the Sierra Madres. These tribes here did a similar thing. They ran away into the hills along, these are called the bheels, which is, in Hindi, means the arrow people. Okay, people who shoot arrows. And they ran away into the hills to hide from the Persian invaders. Long time back, this is hundreds of years ago. And they've lived in these hills ever since. And they were hunter-gatherers. Okay. And they only do subsistence agriculture, but they're mainly hunter-gatherers who lived in this area. And so we are following that tribe here. Okay. So they have a very, very great history, very brave people. And these are the photographers who took these pictures. I just want to mention, these are the kids from those tribes, okay? So the photography is theirs, right? So we followed the people in the village, and when we follow the people in the village, we're following the women. Because the men are not going anywhere, okay? Most of them are just lying in their beds. Most of them are basically under the influence of alcohol or suffering from hangover. Okay, so we basically follow the women. So I will just lead you through a bunch of pictures here and show you what happens. Okay. So it's 7 to 9 a.m. She's making a flatbread. It's called a roti, and it's a flatbread. It's sort of, you can think of it as a thick tortilla. Okay, it's made of corn flatbread.
Is corn wheat or is corn what we call maize?
Maize.
Okay.
So, and that's early in the morning, 2 hours of cooking. 2 hours of cooking early in the morning. That kid there was 8 years old, I believe. Okay? And she was as old as at that time, my oldest daughter. And then at 10 a.m. they all take off with axes. For 2 hours they cut wood in the forest. That's the flip-flops I was talking about. 70 pounds of wood every day. Okay, we walked for 2 hours, so that was about a 5-kilometer walk, one way. We carried on their hands. I couldn't pick that up. I could not even budge it. all the way back on that terrain. You see the load on that bleeding woman's head. All on 2 tortillas in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. We were falling. We were all falling all over the place. Our fancy shoes, hiking boots, we were falling, and they were laughing at us. But they were some of them were barefoot, and others were, with flip-flops and stuff like that. But we were still climbing hills here. One hour later, stopping. You can see your feet. That's a water stop, actually. Back home at 3 p.m. So we set out at 10 a.m. Back home at 3. Okay. This is what happened. This is what happens every single day in those hills. And that's their stash for cooking. So they come back and then they make their evening meal. 2 hours of cooking in the evening. Flatbreads and a little bit of lentils. That's their meal. Nothing else. I want you to look at that black spot on the back of the stove. That's soot. So they're chopping wood, and that's how the forests are disappearing. Okay, so it's for cooking only. Nothing else. That's their energy need. They don't need heating, they don't need lighting, they don't need any other energy source, anything else except for cooking. Okay, yes.
Don't they have milk?
I will come to that as one point in a second. So, yes. So cooking is a huge energy hog. Huh? Now, you see the scalloping of the hills there? Right? It's got this. I wondered what that was. And then I was illuminated by one of the people there. They said, you see you see those trees, those hills all used to be completely full of trees, right? And now you can barely see some. And these are actually being chopped. You can see that they're all kind of stunted because they're slowly being taken away. And the scallops are cattle walks. Right? The cattle don't go down the hill, along the steepest descent. They kind of go around and round, and that's what makes those scallops. So those are all for cattle. Okay. And the barrenness is coming from this. The women cut the trees, the cows eat the underbrush, all the grass and everything, right? And then along come the goats, they eat the roots. Okay. And then everything is gone. It's barren. Nothing will grow anymore. Because the water doesn't retain soil doesn't retain any water. Right? There's no water. Okay. And all of this, you see, this is globalization for you. If you look at what happened in the last 10 years, the number of goats has shot through the roof. Okay? Because of demand for mutton in the Middle East. And India also, because India has been ascending getting more and more prosperous, which means more and more meat. People are eating more and more meat. Okay? So that exponential rise is basically killing the forests there. So 3 lines of attack. Okay? It's a very, very complicated problem. So what we wanted to do was to stop this, right? How do we stop this? Okay. Because basically these people have to cook.
What other export do they have?
Nothing. Pretty much nothing. It's all wheat. Right now, their cash crop is goats. Okay, the cash crop is goats.
It's just too many people.
These are people whose average income does not exceed, they were given $2 a day, actually, by the government to stop cutting the forest, and they were employed elsewhere, like building roads and stuff like that. But they didn't want to do that.
So how large is the average family?
So the average family is okay. So it varies. So the average, I would say, is there's is joint family. So the generations live together. So let's say parents, okay, usually of the male, parents of the male, the wife, and between 2 and 5 kids.
Too many people.
Yes. And in fact, even in that single village, a microcosm, you go to the household with 5 kids, and the kids are in bad shape. They don't have any clothes, they don't have any shoes, they have nothing. It's cold in the winter, and they're running around with nothing on them. Like nothing at all, no shred of clothing, and no shoes. Okay, I mean, it can get pretty cold. It's about 40s and 50s, and they have nothing. But you go to the households with 1 or 2 kids, the kid is going to school. There is a little bit of order, cleanliness, It's amazing what a huge difference that makes. Okay. So yes, that does make a huge difference. But it's a very complex problem, and this is what I want to bring out is it's not easy to solve this. Okay. As an engineer, I want to fix problems. Okay. And that's why once I saw this, I said, oh my God, we need to find a solution. And I've been trying for the last 3 years, and it's very, very difficult for the following reason. You see, this is all they have. This is their currency. This is mom and her son. They're carrying the wood and going to the village, which is 5 kilometers away. Okay, so here's the hills. There are tribals live here, and on the other side of the hill is the desert, of course, right? So the tribals are living here, cutting the forests, and below here is a village, okay, which is not a tribal, a non-tribal village, okay, where people have cows and so on and so forth, and they do regular things like farming, milking cows, making buttermilk, making pottery, those kinds of stuff. So these people carry the wood down there, and they bring back buttermilk. Okay, they bring back buttermilk. So it's currency for them. This is the only thing they barter. This is a woman that day who was carrying this pump, agricultural pump, down to the village 5 kilometers for repairs. Okay, and her exchange, of course, was wood. She should give wood and get repairs done on her pump. Okay. This is just carrying for money. And I showed you 2 different tribes, right? The first one, these are called the Garacias. These are the true nomads, okay? And then this one is a Hindu. So different people, communities, all of them living together, doing pretty much the same thing. That's the road to the village. You can see all of them going towards the village carrying stuff on their heads. For trade, this is their trade. But apart from the fact that they're cutting the forest, there is another huge problem. 2 million people in the world die of smoke inhalation. All right? For cooking, smoke inhalation for cooking, household smoke. So this is the 5th largest threat to women and children, health threat in the developing world. Okay, so it's huge. You can see why. They have an open flame. It's very sooty, right? And they're inhaling all of this. That was in Mewar. This is a different part of India. It's in the Himachal region, up in the Himalayas. Same situation. That's around the world. Everywhere, people cooking with firewood. How many people do you think cook with firewood every day in the world? They're pretty much all, so 3 billion. 3 billion. So almost half of humanity today still cooks with firewood. And each family harvests about 20 kilograms of firewood a day for cooking. Just for cooking, nothing else. This is their energy need, right? In Africa, same problem. Okay. So here's the open flame that they're cooking on. That is a sort of plate that held ashes. So it's a chimney, and outside of the chimney is a plate holding ashes. This is what comes out of it. And you can imagine that that's what goes into their lungs. Okay, it's black carbon. And this used to be, what they used to inhale was basically carbon, right? Over the last 30 years, people have done studies where they have actually taken the gases and analyzed them. And increasingly, there is a lot of mercury and lead in it. Because these places are downstream from Delhi and the surrounding regions where industries are sprouting up. And the industrial effluents from coal power plants and other plants are getting locked up in the trees. Okay, and when they burn the trees, all of these harmful stuff comes out, and they're breathing all that.
Can that get into ruts and harden, or is it just a powder?
This stuff here? No, this is just particulate matter. So it's just powder. All of this is just powder.
Does it harden?
No, it doesn't. At least I don't know what happens to it, but it's just pollution. But firewood is very important to them because it builds community, right? The women go out together every morning and they gossip about their husbands, right? And and the kids go with them, and that's the only time they have to spend with their kids. So it's a community building exercise, and they're not going to give it up actually that easily. So firewood binds the community. So families go out together, mothers and daughters, sons. And this is the 8-year-old. She went on that 10-kilometer trek, and she carried her own bundle back. Okay, age 8. That's when they start doing this. Okay. And that's her grandmother. So grandma went along. You can see the pride in their faces, though. These are not, people who are bowed down by circumstances by any means. They're very, very proud. That's one of the problems that the NGOs has with these people, is that they're very proud. They don't listen to anybody. Okay, so, and that's the girl at the end of the day when we got back to the village. She still has a smile plastered on her face. Okay, she's just spent 6 hours walking up and down hills. And you see, this is the only place where the different tribes meet, actually. You can see sort of in their dresses how they have different kinds of clothing. So they're all different tribes, and they all kind of come together to harvest wood. If not for that, you see, they actually live very far apart. There's one house way over there and one house way over here. So they would not have that feeling of community but for this. So the women actually bind the community together. Okay, and firewood is very important in that activity. These are various women going to the village to sell wood. Okay, and they go together and they were laughing and singing. The whole thing is, this seems very depressing, but when you go with them, you're the ones who are depressed. They're the ones who are happy. So it's like totally crazy stuff. And there's a brisk trade, you see, because they take the wood to the villages, and the people in the village use the wood for firewood. They also sometimes they will carry feed for the cows. Okay, so they bring that down, and then these people produce crops and vegetables and milk and so on, and send that to the city. And the city, of course, is nothing but a commercial center. That's the city of Udaipur. That's the center square in Udaipur, and there's a lot of activity there. And then they send manufactured goods and processed energy back. So you see that there's a trickle this way and a trickle that way that sustains the whole community. So you can't really break the problem that easily. But this simply cannot go on because you end up with that.
Well, how do they view the destruction of their own land?
Oh, they hate it. I mean, of course, they say, well, they're very well aware of the problems. I mean, they're very well aware that there's no water anymore, right? There's a huge water shortage. They talk of their sort of, people 20 years ago who used to get the wood for firewood in their backyard, and now they have to travel 5 kilometers out just to get wood. Okay, and they know that in 10 years they'll be traveling even more. So they know that they're just basically just pushing the envelope on existence there. Okay, the primary concern, of course, is water, because they don't have any water. This was, so basically 20 years ago, they got their firewood from here, right? Now it's all gone. So we asked them, we cornered all the women and we said, we give you anything, cell phones, television, whatever you want, right? What is it that you want the most? Number one, water. Okay. Not only do they have to travel 5 kilometers to get wood, they have to travel 7 kilometers to get water. In Africa, the average is 4 kilometers for water. A woman has to go out every day to get water. The average distance is 4 kilometers. Okay. And of course, on the other side of the mountain is this. They're very well aware of this. Okay? It's the same region. So 3 billion everywhere. This is a picture everywhere. I have a student who's going to Cameroon in the winter. Look at the very same issue. And I have people, NGOs that are basically talking to us from Rwanda and from Somalia, same problem everywhere. Okay. And this picture actually is the most amazing picture if you look at it. That's in Mali. They're carrying wood, but there's not a single tree to be seen anywhere. It's all gone. They probably go miles to get a piece of wood. It's not a simple problem to fix, and this is what I learned, okay? Because everything is connected. You see, I've shown you how all of this is connected, right? I covered this. Energy, right? Firewood, water, because they're cutting forests, water shortage. They've destroyed the ecology, okay? And it hinges on their social stability. We just cannot take firewood out of the picture because then their social networks break down, right? And it hinges on status of women. Girls don't get educated because they have to go get firewood and help the moms around the house. The boys kind of go and get some education in the village school. Their health is affected by this, clearly. It's a very, very tough problem to break. Not for lack of trying, actually. There are lots of people trying to break the problem. India has 1 million NGOs. Okay, everybody and his brother in India belongs to NGO now. Okay, so it's not like people are not trying. It's just a very difficult problem. And the irony is this. These are the tribals who live up on the hills, who are cutting the firewood. These are the villagers who live in the bottom rearing cows and doing agriculture. That's a city. If I plot on this, I like to plot graphs. So if I look at this on the x-axis and the y-axis, suppose I plot energy intensity. How much energy a person consumes in each of these places, right? The curve would look like that. And this is still, this is still 1/10 of what we consume here. Our consumption is way up over the roof there. Okay? This is where they are. And you know what really tears me up, actually? The first time I went, I was all gung-ho. I was a technologist. I was going to fix these people, correct? And then I realized, we're asking these people to change. Right? I was going and telling these people you should stop cutting firewood. What right do I have to tell them to do that? I am way up there. You see? I wonder why these people just don't slap me around.
Well, people at both levels have to change, not just one.
Yes, I agree. In different ways. They have to change in different ways. You're right. But unfortunately, we don't have the moral authority to tell them to change.
Well, when you're living at the subsistence level, you don't have those choices.
Correct, you don't have this choice. Which is where they are. They are at the subsistence level. They don't have a choice. Okay. So then you think, this is what I thought. Should we intervene? What does intervene mean, right? How will it make their life better? If I make the women stop cutting firewood and send the girls to school, is that actually good? what is it going to do to their society, to their bonds? The girls go to school, what are they going to do? Are they going to get like advanced degrees in medicine? They're not going to do any of that stuff. There are no opportunities for them after college or school or whatever. Right? Where is their horizon? They don't have a horizon. So we ask the women, what are your aspirations? I want to eat food tomorrow. What are your aspirations for your kids? They didn't even know what that meant. So there are NGOs that are working in that area. The one that I'm working with is called the Foundation for Ecological Security. And their mission is to stop deforestation. They actually don't care about the people. Okay? They just want them to stop deforestation because otherwise we have deserts. So, and they talk to the people, they have village councils. And so they did this very interesting thing. They cordoned off a part of the area around the village and they told the villagers, look, do not cut firewood here. Let's do an experiment. We'll pay you. Do not cut firewood here and do not graze your cows here. Okay? Let's just try this. And they actually employed the villagers. So here the villagers are taking up and planting trees and all that stuff. And they actually, this is a great NGO. They actually planted the trees in native proportions. So you actually identified native trees and planted them in the proportion in which the native forests were, trying to rejuvenate the forest back. Okay? So very, very good NGO. And there's the villagers working on that project, planting trees on a hill that originally was forested. So this is the picture in 2004 of a hill they started, okay, cordoning off. 2008. Wow. This is a 4-year forest. Okay, remember the forest that went away was a hundreds of years forest. Okay, but this is in 4 years. Another view of that. So you can see the wall here. You see, that's the wall that they built around the place. Okay, so no wood, cutting of wood, and no cattle. 2008. It comes back with a vengeance. Okay, and they also do things like biogas. So they take the cow dung and they use it to cook and light and so on and so forth. And they've been doing some of that. But biogas is not popular amongst the villagers because you look at that flame that's coming out of a biogas stove and you look at the wood burning flame. Completely different, right? You want your pizza from a brick oven, you wouldn't want your pizza to be cooked on a stovetop. Okay, so that's the difference in the two flames. So we've been going with students, that's me, and this is Sailesh Rao. He was here to give a talk earlier this semester. He'll probably come back next year if you guys are interested, next semester. And I would really, so Sailesh is one of those people who, when you meet, they change you. Okay, so very few people like this, right? You run into them and they say something, and then you start thinking, and then before you know it, you're like, this guy has it going on. So that's Sailesh for you. He has it figured out. So this is again, we went again next year. So Sailesh goes with us every year. And then Sailesh with my daughter, when we went to India. And that's his book, it's called Carbon Dharma. And he talks about this issue of how carbon basically is getting back at us, okay? And how we need to watch carbon. So he's been instrumental in shaping my thoughts on this whole thing. So I've told you the story of how I began to connect the dots. So this is some of the thought process that I went through. We all know that actions have consequences. The Bhagavad Gita says that, and every other spiritual tradition says, right? This is the fundamental thing, is that you can't just do whatever you want. Okay, so every action has consequences. You can call it karma or whatever stuff. It has consequences. But Sailesh, this is what he told me, and that really got me thinking. He said, look, inaction has consequences. You cannot not act. Because one of the things I said is, this is very depressing. I don't think any of us can solve this problem, right? And he said, but yes, but inaction has consequences. We can't just sit on our hands and not do anything. So I thought for a long time, I said, what do I do? And I sought counsel in some ways from people I believe are the two greatest minds of the 20th century. And this is Gandhi's original quote. And of course, Obama has used this and done nothing else. But we must be the change that we want to see in the world, right? So I can't just ask people to change themselves. I have to change myself. So that's the main thing I got out of that one. And I've always been a Gandhian all my life. I always have thought he had it right in many ways. I don't know how many of you know that Gandhi is a libertarian. Okay, he's what I would call a libertarian socialist. And so was Einstein, by the way. And both, Gandhi was a vegetarian, and Einstein towards the end of his life was vegan. So problems cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them, right? So we need to completely change ourselves. What this means is that we have been behaving in a stupid way, and that we need to rethink the way we've been behaving. And that's very difficult to do, because that involves something that is very difficult, which is self-examination. It's very easy to talk about other people and their issues and problems and so on, but when we start thinking about ourselves, that is when change happens. Okay, and that's what Christ said as well. So it's not something new. It's been said many times, and that's why I went vegan. Because I realized something when I went to India. I realized something. I was already vegetarian. Okay, I used to drink milk and enjoy ice cream and so on and so forth. I still enjoy ice cream, and vegan ice cream is awesome. So here's why I went vegan. I said, if I drink milk, I have to eat beef. You cannot have cows roaming around. Because in India, they don't eat beef. Okay? There are 300 million cows roaming around. Okay? And these cows live for 20-something years. And after the first few years, their productivity of milk is very low. They give 1/8 the milk of an American cow. And they eat everything. That's not sustainable. They have to be killed. Okay? My grandmother would kill me if she heard me say that. But we cannot sustain it. Okay? So if you have one milk, you have to eat the cows. Right? And you cannot have them free roaming. You have to confine them. Okay? Because if you have them free roaming, they take up too much land area. Right? You have to confine them. Just like we do here. You have to stick them in little things that they can hardly move in. And when you do that, they don't survive for very long because they get sick. So you have to pump them with antibiotics. 25 million tons of antibiotics a year in this country are pumped into animals. It goes into the water. It goes into your rivers. It goes into your soil. That is what we need to do to the earth. Right? That is the choice I would be making. Okay? So, and then, if you're going to make them live for a very short time, you need them to grow very fast. Right? A cow in the United States has to grow to full size by 14 months, not 4 years like in India. Okay? So, if you want to grow them in 14 months, you have to feed them very high nutrition. Corn, soy. Which means you have to monoculture. You have to kill everything else off. Which means you have to have Roundup ready corn. Which means you have to have barren seeds. Which means you need Monsanto. Which means you need ADM. You need to poison the soil, you need to poison the earth, you need to poison the atmosphere, you need to poison the rivers.
And then it's burning it up.
Sorry?
And then they burn it up.
Yes. We have to make that choice. I have to make that choice. I will not make that choice. I choose to go vegan. I cannot participate in this process. That's the choice I made.
God loves you, right?
And the Gulf Dead Zone, GMOs, all of it, connect the dots. All of this is caused by this problem. simple choice. But we will not make it. We will never make it. One reason why we will not make it is because every single corporation is here to convince you that it's a stupid choice. The corn growers don't want you to do that.
Have you heard of the corn, the shirts made out of corn?
Probably. I mean, they make everything out of corn these days, right? Even sugar out of corn, which is killing our kids. Okay? They don't want to do that. The fertilizer industry doesn't want to do that. Oil industry doesn't want you to do that. The farm implement industry doesn't want you to do that. Nobody wants you to do that. So you're fighting huge, huge corporations. Another thing I did was, apart from going vegan, I will not stop talking about this. I'm a pain in the posterior to everybody, but I will continue to be a pain because I don't care. Okay. And St. Francis of Assisi was vegan. Okay? And he said that you preach the gospel at all times, and I like the next words, and when necessary, use words. Okay? So what that means is you have to act, right? Clearly. You should be the change. And it's the same thing that Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And so I will speak, and I'll talk in my class. I have kids there from farm families. I don't care. So another thing I'm doing, apart from talking, is as an engineer, I want to find a solution to this problem. So I've been working on something. So here's the problem. The trees are gone, there is no water, and the local economy is weak. But is there something that is abundant in that region that I can use to good effect, right? When we look for a rich resource that's free. And the one thing that is available is the sun. So what I'm doing is to build a solar cooker. Yeah, but this is the problem. There are tons and tons of solar cookers, okay? But I have to build a solar cooker that you can cook in the dark with. Because the villagers cook early in the morning and late in the evening when the sun is not shining. So there's plenty of sunshine. Okay, there's no dearth of sunshine. And it's funny because Edison, another vegan, okay, said this. He said, we are like 10 farmers chopping down the fence when we should be using solar energy. And, I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. Okay, and this was in 1931. I read a very interesting quote by Abraham Lincoln somewhere in the middle of his presidency, when he said that I fear for my country because I see corporations taking it over. I mean, that's the thing with the great minds is they see very, very far ahead. So one of the things we started with was solar lights. So this is what Silesh did before I started the solar cooker project. So he went to the villagers and he said, I'm going to give you solar lights for free, use it. One reason why he did that was to see how receptive they were to technology, right? And changing themselves based on technology. So he gave them the solar lights, and when he gave them the solar lights, initially they said, why do we need these things, right? When it's dark, we go to sleep. I mean, God gave us night to go to sleep. Why are you giving us this stuff? And he said, well, I got 300 of these, you can take it, right? So he left it in the village. And everybody was like, oh, whatever. And so 6 months later, he goes back, and he's mobbed by the women. They're all running after him, giving him cucumbers and other produce and stuff, and he's like, what just happened here? And they said, oh, you're like God, you gave us light. And Silas is like, really? How come in 6 months I became Brad Pitt? Because it's mostly the women who are totally into it. And then it turned out that those 6 months was snake bite season. Snake bite season. So before they had the lights, women would go out in the morning to the forest, right, before the men woke up. And about 30 women in the village would suffer snake bite in snake bite season every year. And about 2 or 3 would die. That year there were 0 snake bites because they could see where they were going. They weren't stepping on the snakes. So totally unintended consequence, right? So he's been actually doing solar lights work there for a while. That's one of the ladies in the village, they carrying around the solar lights. Another thing that we started doing was looking at the solar cooker. So here's the initial design that was placed in the village. So what we are doing is actually engineering a new solar cooker that has the following constraints. They should be able to cook indoors because that's where they cook, right? Sitting in their houses and managing their kids. Cook sitting down, and cook early in the morning and late in the afternoon, which means that from the solar collector, we need to have a storage device that stores heat, okay? And then releases the heat at the desired temperature, which is actually very hot, okay? It's 200 degrees centigrade, right? For boiling water, making rice, the cookers can be about 150 degrees centigrade would suffice. But to make the flatbreads, they have to be at least 200 degrees centigrade. So it's been really hot, and the energy has to come out really fast, right? And it has to allow you 2 hours of cooking in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. Another thing, we want to build this out of natural materials, and it should not cost more than $250, okay? Because we want to actually give this away for free in the villages, based on getting money from foundations. So Silesh actually belongs to a foundation that wants to supply solar cookers there for free. Okay, so it has to be very inexpensive and hopefully built out of local materials by the villagers themselves. So it creates a self-sustaining industry in the village. And no moving parts, no requiring electricity because there's no electricity there. Okay, so that's the challenge. And so a year and a half ago, we built the first prototype in the College of Engineering. My senior design class built what we call the IHOC cooker. Since then, we've been changing the design, improving it, and so on and so forth. So now we have something that can actually boil water. You can collect heat all through the day and boil water at night. We haven't gotten up to the temperatures that you need to make flatbread yet, but we're kind of working on that right now. It's a very, very challenging problem that initially when I set out as a naive, uninformed, sort of crazy person. And it's actually been a very great experience for me to be involved in this. But one thing I learned after getting into this whole business is that is captured by this quote, that sort of informs you about your own naivety in some ways. So it's complicated.